Hey guys, so today I have a very special video that I'm making for y'all, and it's a tribute to my World War II veteran friend who unfortunately passed away back in June of this year at the age of 99. And this is a video I've been wanting to put together for a few months now, and I actually have. And this video is going to tell you about his life, about his military service. I can tell you that, some tears came to my eyes putting this together. I laughed at times, remembering things that we talked about, and it really touched me in a big way to put this together for y'all. And I just hope all of you will watch the entire video. I've got some very special stories to share with you about his life and about his military service. So please watch the whole video. It will be a lengthy one, but it's going to be worth your time. And like I said, I've put together a lot of notes and everything. I've got pages and pages in this notebook here I'm going to be reading from. And a lot of the stuff is from little notes and scratch pieces of paper that I would jot down information he told me when I would visit him. And I also, he couldn't always remember specific dates. And so I did look online and got some dates when it come to war related stories and stuff. So please watch all of this. It's going to be a great video. You might get emotional, you might laugh at times, but I want to do this in honor of him and tell you his story. And so let's get started. So I want to tell you, everybody, about a great man that I had the honor of calling a friend. In October of 2016, I attended a Halloween party at the assisted living center where my grandmother was a resident. My older sister was there also, and she knew that there was a World War II veteran who was a resident there as well. My sister came up to me and told me that there was someone she wanted to introduce me to. So we walked across the room, and there I saw an older gentleman standing up with his hands on the handles of a walker. Our eyes met as my sister introduced me to a man that I would grow to love and admire. His name was Elvin Wright Littlejohn. At the time, he was 94 years old. As we began to talk, my sister knew that her mission was accomplished, and so she left us to begin what would become a strong bond in friendship. After less than 10 minutes, he asked me if I wanted to continue our conversation in his room. Once we got to his room and sat down, he wanted me to know right away that he was no hero. One of the very first things he said to me when we went to his room is, "I'm no hero." So the story begins. Mr. Littlejohn was born on April 5th, 1922, and he was born in Abbeville, Mississippi. His parents had 3 children. Elvin was the youngest. He had 2 older sisters. From a young age, Elvin loved to help others. He was very well liked by older people because he was always willing to help them no matter what they needed done. He loved to work with his hands. And I remembered all throughout the time I knew him, he would always talk about how much he loved to work, and he loved to work with his hands. He respected his elders, and they loved him for it. When he was about 14 years old, he started working at his uncle's sawmill. He made a grand total of 15 cents an hour. So 14 years old, 15 cents an hour. After he'd worked there for a while, his uncle came to him one day and told him that he would have to start taking a penny and a half out of the 15 cents an hour to put towards a trust fund. Elvin worked with his uncle for a few years. While in high school, he attended Abbeville High School in Abbeville, Mississippi. He graduated high school in 1940. He did a lot of farm work as well. Then he met a girl named Ruby, and they fell in love and would eventually marry. They got married on June 28th of 1942. Less than 4 months later, Mr. Littlejohn got a letter in the mail from the U.S. government. He had been drafted into service. He was drafted into the U.S. Army. He was told to report to Camp Shelby, Mississippi, and he did so. And he was inducted into the U.S. Army on October 22nd of 1942. He was then entered into active service on November 5th of 1942. He was one of 82 soldiers that were sent from Camp Shelby to Fort Riley, Kansas. When they got there, the group of 82 were split up. The new group that he was part of consisted of soldiers from Mississippi, Wisconsin, and Illinois. They were trained with the M1 Garand, M1 Carbine, 1911 pistol, the Thompson, and etc. Mr. Littlejohn told me that he was a good shot with the M1 Garand and the M1 Carbine, but he said he couldn't hit the broadside of a barn with that 1911. Just couldn't hit anything with it. He did love to shoot that Thompson, though. He loved that Thompson submachine gun. He was trained on how to operate and drive a tank. He really enjoyed driving tanks and said they were easy to drive. He became a designated tank driver. He also was a great shot with the .30 caliber machine gun that was mounted in his tank. His tank was a small light tank that had a 4-man crew. It had a 37mm cannon, and then it had, the .30 caliber machine gun. The unit that he served in was the 2nd Tank Battalion of the 9th Armored Division. After training at Fort Riley, they were sent to California deserts for more training. They trained in the scorching heat. It was hot, very hot in the desert. Mr. Littlejohn said that it was so hot that it was about 135 degrees in the shade. The only problem is, he said, there was no shade. After California, they were sent to Camp Polk, Louisiana, for more training. After training at Camp Polk, they traveled to New York, where they boarded the Queen Mary. The Queen Mary, this was in August of 1944. The Queen Mary was designed to hold about 3,000 men, but he said there was about 10,000 men on that ship. They left the U.S. and set sail for Britain. He talked about how the Queen Mary was fast, and he said every 7 minutes the Queen Mary would have to zigzag just to prevent the chance of being hit by a torpedo from a German submarine. He said some of the men got so seasick that they wanted to die. Men were just throwing their guts up. They were just miserable. They wanted to die. They were that miserable, so seasick. They arrived in Britain on October 27th of 1944. Then they arrived in France on September 25th of 1944. Then we get to the Battle of the Bulge, which was the beginning of where Mr. Littlejohn's main service started. On December 16th, the Battle of the Bulge began. The Germans, it was their final throwing everything they had into trying to stop what was taking place. One thing about the German army, Mr. Littlejohn said they were well-trained and very disciplined, and he respected the German soldier because of how disciplined they were. He said they were great soldiers, well-trained. He also talked about the German equipment, especially the tanks, and especially the King Tiger tank. He talked about the German steel. They were well-made machines. He said that the 37mm cannon on his tank didn't stand a chance against a King Tiger. He said that if you came face to face with a German Tiger tank, you better hurry up and get your butt out the way, or you're in trouble. He talked about all the fighting that took place during the Battle of the Bulge and about how cold it was. It was so cold. He said it was difficult to sleep inside of his tank because it was so cold in the tank. Because the steel was cold and it made him cold. Colder than just being cold. He said besides the soldiers that were being killed and wounded, lots were being evacuated to the rear due to trench foot. He had a tank commander one day that was just hopping off of a tank. Just getting down. Wasn't a battle taking place at this time, just hopping off the tank. and the tank commander landed wrong on his ankle and he broke his ankle. They called a medic over, put a splint on his leg, and then they loaded him up on a stretcher on the hood of a Jeep. The Jeep driver began to take this wounded tank commander to a field hospital area, behind the lines. But unfortunately, a German 88 shell hit that Jeep and killed the Jeep driver and his tank commander with the broken ankle, killed them instantly. Then he had another good friend that became tank commander. A really good friend, a man he admired and considered him one of his greatest friends. It wasn't long before that friend had to be evacuated due to frostbite. He'd only been a tank commander just a short period of time. So I don't know if that was a few days or maybe a week. It wasn't long. He had to be evacuated. So then Mr. Littlejohn became the new tank commander. He ended up having his tank disabled, and so he was sent behind the lines to regroup and get a new tank. It was at that time that they linked up with the 101st Airborne. They moved back to the front lines and continued to engage the German soldiers, the German army. He also talked about how food got scarce as well as the ammo and the supplies. It was scarce. He talked about, how cloudy it was and the planes couldn't make supply drops for food and ammunition and everything. But then he said after about 4 days, he said it was a Sunday morning, and he said the clouds opened up to clear sky. And he said planes began to drop the much needed food and supplies and ammunition they needed. He said at that time it was the most beautiful thing to see. Just the clouds opening up, clear sky, and here's all these supplies. He said it got so bad they were so hungry while waiting for, the drops to be made on the cloudy days, that they would kill any animal that they saw. Any animal that they saw, they would kill it just so they'd have something to eat. Then on Christmas Eve, they had moved into a town that they occupied. He was down in the cellar drinking schnapps with some buddies when a German shell hit the house and it collapsed all around them. Fortunately, they weren't injured. He remembers also one night when he was trying to sleep in his tank, he said some loudmouth kept running his mouth, being all loud and everything outside his tank. And Mr. Littlejohn and his buddies are trying to sleep. So he wanted to go have a talk with whoever this was. When Mr. Littlejohn opened the hatch on his tank, none other than General George Patton was the loudmouth going off on somebody outside of Mr. Littlejohn's tank. It was General Patton that was the loudmouth, keeping Mr. Littlejohn and his buddies from getting their sleep. One thing he also noticed about Patton standing there was those pearl-handled guns on his hips. He had 2 guns, pearl handles on his hips. He distinctively remembered that as well. After the Battle of the Bulge, the 9th R Division had to reorganize. They returned to active operations in February of 1945. On March 7th, 1945, the 9th Armored Division captured the Ludendorff Bridge at Remagen on the Rhine River. Mr. Littlejohn's tank was one of the very first tanks to cross that bridge. And one thing I'll tell you guys is, he couldn't remember specific dates and stuff, so I was looking online when I was putting all this together, trying to get the specific dates for this video. He couldn't remember exact dates, but I wanted to kind of fill in the gaps. And if you guys want to know more about the 9th Armored Division, you definitely look into them, and you can learn more about a lot of the specifics of what they did as well. After the bridge, the 9th Armored Division pushed quickly through central Germany. It wasn't long before the German army began to collapse and surrender. Word got around that Hitler had killed himself and that the war in Europe was over. After this, then, Mr. Littlejohn served 6 months duty in occupation duty in Germany. He said that he still liked to test his shot with the 30 cal machine gun in his tank. He really liked to hunt deer with the 30 caliber machine gun in his tank. He said what he would do is he would take just 1 round. He would load it in the 30 cal machine gun while sitting in his tank. He would line it up, find that deer, and he would hit it. He did this several times, And other tankers caught on to this as well. They did a lot of hunting. And he said that they hunted so much that the deer population began to decrease quite a bit. He also said that because of their hunting so often, that it upset the Germans, because a lot of the food sources were being taken out. A lot of the animals, especially deer, were being killed by U.S. soldiers, and it upset the German people. During his occupation duty, his tank was in charge of guarding a warehouse. Also, part of his duty was he had to make sure that all of the civilians obeyed the curfew that was put in place. They had to be off the streets at home by a specific time. One night, he remembered hearing outside of his tank a lot of people that were talking, just lots and lots of people, and he knew curfew had already passed. He opened the hatch and began to tell them that it was past curfew and that they needed to go home. Some of the people didn't care too much for being told what to do, so they refused to leave. Well, Mr. Littlejohn reached down the side of his tank and pulled out his Thompson submachine gun and held it up in the air. Within a matter of seconds, the street was empty. Mr. Littlejohn said overall the German people were very nice people. They were good people. He wanted that to be known. The German people, a lot of times they were shown in a bad light or whatever, but the German people overall, for the most part, were really good people. He did say that. His occupation duty ended and he returned back home to the States in January of 1946. The majority of his unit had already returned to the United States on October 10th of 1945. They returned back in New York. And 3 days later, on October 13th, 1945, the unit was disbanded. But he didn't arrive to the States until January 10th. So him and I guess a small portion of his unit or group stayed behind, and he didn't make it home until January of 46. Then, on January 15th, 1946, Mr. Littlejohn was officially separated from the military after serving 3 years and 3 months. At the time of his discharge, he rose to the rank of technician 4th grade. During the war, he made $27 a month, which was a lot better than the 15 cents working for his uncle at the sawmill. Mr. Littlejohn was never wounded, and he never received a scratch during the whole time he was at war. Not a scratch, never wounded. He said that he knows God was watching over him. He also believes that he didn't actually kill any of the enemy. A lot of these soldiers, are portrayed in movies just killing the enemy and everything, and almost like they don't have a heart or it doesn't affect them. But realistically, a lot of these men, that went overseas, they didn't want to kill anybody. They were just doing what they had to do. That's just a part of war, is killing. But just the thought of taking a life, even if it is your enemy, it still bothered people, just the thought of doing that. Whether they actually did it or didn't, But Mr. Littlejohn, he's pretty confident that he didn't have any direct involvement with the killing of a German soldier. For his service during the war, he was awarded the World War II Victory Medal, the American Theater of Operations Medal, Good Conduct Medal, European, African, Middle Eastern Medal, and the Distinguished Unit Badge. I asked Mr. Littlejohn if he collected any souvenirs during the war, and he said no, he just wanted to get back home. We see in movies and different things, soldiers brought back Lugers or everything. He didn't care nothing about that. He just wanted to get his service done over there and come on home. He wanted to get home to his wife, his family, friends, parents, get back and return back to, just his normal life. After the war, he and his wife had 2 daughters. He worked for many years as a welder, a machinist, and a mechanic. He and his wife also owned a camper and RV business for several years in Memphis, Tennessee. A couple of hobbies of his was he loved going to flea markets. He loved canned vegetables. He liked selling canned vegetables and produce and everything at flea markets. He loved doing that. He also had a hobby of singing and writing gospel songs while he played guitar. He loved playing guitar, he loved singing, but unfortunately, as he got upper in age, his arthritis really kicked in and he could no longer play guitar. And I remember there was a guitar in his room when I would visit him. It would just be sitting in the corner. And it just kind of made me sad, you know, because I knew how bad he wanted to play that, but he just couldn't because of the arthritis that swollen his knuckles and everything. He always considered himself to be a man of faith. I remember asking him what his tips were for living a long life. Like, Mr. Littlejohn, what is your tips? Like, how did you live so long? How are you, what did you do? And he said, just put your life in God's hands and he'll work it out for you. He let me know that he lived a wonderful life. And if he had to do it all over again, he wouldn't change a thing. I've had a wonderful life, is what he said. There were times when he would tell me things that would make me tear up. One story is several years after the war, he received a phone call. And the voice on the other end was his good friend that had been evacuated during the Battle of the Bulge with frostbite. His buddy that became tank commander after the original tank commander was killed. It was his buddy that got the frostbite. And come to find out, his buddy had been looking for Mr. Littlejohn for years and years. They had a great long conversation, brought back a lot of memories. I'm sure they had some laughs. And it felt so good to be reconnected with one of his buddies. They hung up, and then less than a week later, Mr. Littlejohn got another phone call. This time it was a woman's voice on the other line, on the other end. She introduced herself as his buddy's wife. Come to find out that just right after Mr. Littlejohn had received that phone call from his buddy who was looking for him for years, that man passed away that night. Within a few hours of hanging up after reconnecting with his war buddy, Elvin Littlejohn, the man passed away. And the man's wife felt like that was his way of getting closure. He just wanted to find his buddy, Mr. Littlejohn. After years and years of searching, he found him. He found his number, and he was able to speak to him. And that was the closure he needed, and the man passed away a few hours later. Mr. Littlejohn had no idea that that would be the last time he would speak to him, but he's thankful that they reconnected just that one time. Another story that touched me was that Mr. Littlejohn received a bunch of letters and cards and pictures from an elementary school. They had found out about him, found his address, and sent him a bunch of cards and, like I said, letters and pictures they drew and everything. He said that those little kids, their cards and letters and pictures meant more than all the money in the world to him. It felt good for someone to care about him, just to be cared, just to be appreciated and thought of, just to be thought of. Those little kids might have been 7, 8, 9 years old. All the cards he sent him, he wouldn't take all the money in the world for what those kids sent him and what they did for him. It meant that much to him. As I mentioned, Mr. Littlejohn had 2 daughters. Sadly, one daughter passed away in 2004. Then, 2 years later, after 63 years of marriage, the love of his life, Ruby, passed away in 2006. After 63 years of marriage. Mr. Littlejohn ended up moving into assisted living. After I first met him, I would visit him as often as I could, and I would talk to him on the phone as well. My wife and kids got to know him very well. They got to know him and also love him as well. We pretty much adopted him into our family. He became our adoptive grandfather. A lot of times when I would go visit him, my kids would come with me. They'd want to go. I want to go see Littlejohn. We called him Littlejohn. I want to go see him. So they'd come with me. We'd hang out and just have a blast in his room. He loved my kids with a passion. Unfortunately, Mr. Littlejohn never had any grandkids of his own. He just had, him and his wife had the 2 daughters, but never had any grandchildren, so no great-grandchildren either. So he pretty much adopted my children as his own grandchildren. and me and my wife as well. And also, my older sister and my mother were involved with him as well, because visiting with my grandmother, they would check in with him also, seeing if he needed anything, bring him stuff he might need, just check on him. He would also draw pictures and make arts and crafts with my kids and for my kids. It was something to keep him busy. After we had been friends for a while, I would be able to check him out and take him to the store to get supplies and things he needed. We went out to eat, just run errands, whatever he needed. I was able to check him out of the assisted living place and take him to these places. Then, starting in 2018, he began to come over our house for Thanksgiving. He came over that year and he had a blast. He fit right in with the other members of our family. We made a plate with lots of delicious food. He pretty much wanted a bite of just about everything, except he didn't want any deviled eggs, because he didn't want to touch anything that had the devil in it. That was a joke. He said he doesn't mess with, like I said, doesn't mess with anything that has the devil in it, right? That was funny. Then it came time for dessert. He got some of my wife's banana pudding and pecan pie, and he absolutely loved it. Banana pudding, pecan pie, loved it. After staying for several hours, it was time to take him back to the assisted living center. On the drive back, he said that was the best meal that he had eaten in 12 years. What he was implying was that it had been 12 years since his wife had passed away, and he had her good cooking. So he was thankful to come to our house for Thanksgiving and enjoy my wife's cooking. It was a great meal. He enjoyed it, the best in 12 years. Like I said, our bond grew stronger, and I looked forward to revisiting him as much as I could. One thing that I learned quick was how much he loved to eat cornbread and milk for supper. Not dinner, supper, because dinner was lunchtime. Some people still call dinner lunch. I say lunch and then dinner for supper, but he ate it for supper. That was his evening meal, cornbread and milk, religiously every day. I also learned how much he liked orange soda. So I know, sometimes when buddies get together, they might have a cold beer and talk and everything. Well, I would always make sure that if Mr. Littlejohn didn't have any orange soda, I'd bring some with me, and we'd have orange soda while we talked. We had Mr. Littlejohn over for Thanksgiving again in 2019, 2020 as well. Then COVID hit. We weren't sure if he would be able to come to our house for the 2020 Thanksgiving, but he was able to come. The assisted living center had gone into quarantine for many months, and so no visitors could go in and no residents could come out. Luckily, November of 2020 came around, and he was able to come to our house for the third Thanksgiving in a row. Just like the 2 years before, he had a good time with my family. Mr. Littlejohn turned 99 years old on October 5th of 2021. I visited him on his birthday like I always did. I visited him again around the end of April of 2021. I called him a couple times in May, but I didn't get a chance to actually go visit in May. Then in June, I was working so much overtime, and I just had so much going on. I was just so busy, working 50, 60 hours a week and trying to take care of my family that I didn't get to visit him in June. During June, my oldest daughter kept telling me, "Daddy, you need to go visit Littlejohn." She told me at least twice, if not 3 times, "Daddy, you need to go visit Littlejohn. You need to go see him." And I was just so tired, just so tired from working so much, just trying to take care of my family. She kept telling me, "Daddy, you're going to regret it. You need to go visit him. Go see him, I tried calling him a couple times, but didn't get an answer. Then I was randomly on the internet in July of 2021, and I came across his obituary. Mr. Littlejohn, my good friend and buddy of about 4.5 years, had passed away, and I had no idea. I couldn't believe it. About broke my heart. He passed away on June 25th. So his birthday was April 5th. He turned 99, and he passed away on June 25th. 99 years old. I was upset and sad, mad at myself, because even though I just felt I was just so tired from working and stuff, I should have just went. I should have just made a point, no matter how I felt or what I had going on with my family. I should have just made a point to go visit him. But I let myself being tired and just life hinder me, I guess. And now I regret it, and I probably always will. Honestly, though, I believe Mr. Littlejohn understood, because in the time I knew him, he would tell me all the time about how important it was to work, to take care of your family, provide for your family. So I really deep down believe that he understood that it's not that I didn't want to see him. He knew that I was just trying to be the man of my household, trying to do what God wanted me to do and the right thing to do, provide for my family, work hard. So I really deep down believe that he understood that. I really believe that. I really believe that. Well, here it is, November again. Thanksgiving is just a few days away, and he won't be here with us physically. And I can tell you that Thanksgiving won't be the same this year and the years to come. I'm so thankful that he could come those 3 years with us, and I know he would have came this year. But I can guarantee you, though, even though he won't be here physically, we're still going to have a seat reserved here at this very table in honor of his memory. He's going to have his own seat at the table. I can tell you, I'm sure going to miss his stories about life, about the war, his wisdom he shared with me and everything. I'm going to remember also him, talking about how much he loved God, He loved to sing. He would sing some of his songs for me and my children. He even sang here at Thanksgiving. I find comfort, in knowing that he's in a better place. No more health problems or anything bothering him at all. I'm just so thankful to have known this man, to have been able to call him a friend. Thankful for the love that we had for each other, the bond. So I just wanted to share this story with you guys. And I just want to encourage you guys to reach out to the veterans, spend time with them. If you've got a family member that was in World War II or even Korea or Vietnam, whatever, just spend time with them. Just spend time with them. Visit with them. If you see a veteran out in public, thank them for their service. Buy them a meal. Shake their hand. But anyways, guys, I love all of you so much. I thank you guys that are still with me. I know it's a lengthy video. Please share this video. And just remember, we got so much to be thankful for. God bless all of you, and I'll be getting back to you soon.